A warm welcome to the Wednesday edition of the Our City COVID-19 show, giving you the latest updates from home and abroad. I am Michaela Miller. These are your headlines for today. A member of a community policing forum talks to us about the flare-up of gang violence of the Cape Flats. Cape Lives Matter, a 17-year-old has started a movement to highlight deaths on the Cape Flats and remember the incidents who have lost their lives. A private funeral for George Floyd has taken place in hometown of Houston in Texas. It is day 76 of lockdown and the current number of confirmed COVID-19 cases in South Africa is 52,991. There have been 29,606 recoveries and 1,162 deaths. The Western Cape has 34,819 active cases. 20,791 people have recovered and 890 have died. Provincial Health MEC Nomafren Chumbombo and her department are briefing the ad hoc committee on COVID-19 on the situation in the Western Cape. Cape Town has the highest rate of infections and the deaths in the country, and there are fears we will hit the peak of the virus soon, putting severe pressure on hospitals. The briefing is underway and we will bring you an update on this tomorrow. Coronavirus testing criteria have been amended as a result of a global shortage in test kits. Health Minister Willem Kize said his department had prioritized the testing of patients in hospitals with respiratory conditions, people who have had contact with known police positive patients, as well as healthcare workers. In addition, mass testing has been halted. South Africa has to date conducted 968,070 tests. Now the intent is to proceed with targeted screening and testing. Violence on the Cape Flats is a growing concern and has flared up again since the start of level 3 of the national lockdown. Communities fear for their lives as innocent lives are lost. Our city reporter Stephanie Pitt spoke to Mark Rousseau, community liaison for the Steenberg Police Forum, for more on this.
My name is Mark Rousseau, and I am the spokesperson for the Steenberg Community Police Forum. So the Steenberg Precinct incorporates the areas of Lavender Hill, Steenberg, Piet, and Heathfield, as well as Capita Village. So the violence which started up about 3 weeks ago, just about 2.5 weeks ago, is more concentrated to Lavender Hill at this stage, and parts. It also spilled over into Capita Village, where there were two shooting incidents over the last 2 weeks. So that's really where the violence is concentrated. It's more Lavender Hill than anywhere else.
Mark says the South African Police Service's hands have been tied since the start of lockdown. He says peace between gangsters would only happen once they hand in their weapons. The recent surge in gang violence could also be seen as fueled by the cigarette ban.
Police's hands are tied really with fighting, the COVID-19 pandemic and see that people adhere to the regulations. So it's a two-edged sword really. So the violence actually took us, the current gang violence took us very much by surprise. Although we've had rumors that it's going to happen. And what is sort of you in your question to me, you alluded to the fact that there was peace talks, or we really look in terms of that. We as the CPF and the police, we don't really take much notice of that. I will tell you why. Because there can only be peace amongst the gangsters if they hand over their weapons. Because they're saying they're going to make peace and not shooting for a couple of weeks, but they still have the weapons. That really amounts to nothing. So what has helped was really the lockdown levels 5 and 4, And then also the month of Ramadan coincided with that, and that is sort of what assisted in sort of curtailing the gang violence which were prevalent as of December of last year, which was it was very bad at that time. So now as soon as Ramadan was over and we entered lockdown level 3, that is really when the violence erupted again, and not just in our precinct, but all over the place, in Nova Park, in Bonteheuwel, in Mitchells Plain, in Delft, where normally what happens with gang violence, it would start off maybe in Lavender Hill and it would move from there to Nova Park and then into Manenberg and then into Delft. At this particular time, it actually erupted all over the place at sort of the same time. And the experts are saying that what has got to do, what is a lot, there's the ban of cigarettes, because cigarettes have become was like a contraband. It really is a contraband at this point in time, and it's an illicit trade, and the ban on the cigarettes has actually fueled a lot of the gang violence that is currently happening, and that is why it happened all over the place at the same time.
The recent plight of violence has also hindered feeding schemes within the Cape Flats. This is what Mark had to say.
So I'm involved in feeding with Cavender. We feed into a Nova Park, in Lavender Hill, in a lot of the marginalized areas, and the Greater Retreat can also we also feed through the can. We feed all over the place as well. And last week there were a narrow escape, because at one of the feeding stations, while they were feeding, the gangsters started shooting, and they nearly shot some of the children that were standing in the line. And then in Lavender Hill, I know of another incident where it got so bad one day last week that all the feeding stations closed down. So now you see the ripple effect is that feeding can't be done in these areas because of the gang violence. The police don't want these feeding stations, to open because of the, they've asked to be closed. They didn't sort of force the issue, but you don't want to, because now you expose the children and the people coming for food. You're exposing them to this gang violence. So it's really a desperate situation at this point in time.
As innocent lives are lost daily, let's take a look at what some Cape Townians had to say.
Like many Cape Townians, what angers me the most is not the fact that it goes on, because to be honest, it's such a deep-rooted problem that we've become accustomed to it and we live alongside it. But it's the fact that innocent lives keep getting lost. That is the most frustrating, it is the most disturbing. Last year in 2019, there were quite a number of protests against the gang violence, because there was like a record number of people whose lives got claimed. But you look at the fact that there are a lot of communities that are reliant on gangsters, and that became evident through the lockdown when you had gangsters hosting the feeding schemes. So I think one of the main problems is the fact that there is this reliance and this interdependence between poor communities and gangsters, but then also the lack of accountability that comes from those shootings of innocent people. We don't see the gangsters being arrested. We don't see them suffering consequences. We see them walking in and out of prison. And I think that has really deteriorated our faith in the criminal justice system.
With South Africa going into a nationwide lockdown, we saw gang rivals putting their differences aside. We also saw a huge decline in hospital cases, specifically that of trauma units. We are a couple of days now into level 3 of the nationwide lockdown, and that picture has completely changed. Just last week, we saw cases of drive-by shootings in Lentig here in Mitchells Plain. A father and son died in Bonteheuwel. Now is not the time to start with killings. We are facing a pandemic.
Staying with gang violence, we spoke to 17-year-old Cameron Duplessis, who had started a movement called #CapeLivesMatter. Its aim is to highlight the plight of people who live on the Cape Flats, fight for equality in the justice system, and also to march in remembrance of lives lost to gang violence. Let's have a look.
In light of the recent surge of gang violence in the Cape Flats, many citizens fear for their lives as more innocent lives are lost daily. 17-year-old Cameron Duplessis has started an organization hashtag Cape Lives Matter to highlight the state of the Cape Flats and also fight for equal justice system. This is what he had to say.
Cape Lives Matter is an organization that brings light to the great injustice of our justice system. We are family support. We are a family support structure that helps families fight for justice. It all started. It all began very long ago when I myself was served great injustice by our South African justice system, and that is why I've started this organization. I try to keep a platform open for all families of the deceased in order for their voices to be heard. I try to bring light to their stories so that they also don't just become a part of statistics. We march for the families and to keep their story alive so they can also be heard. Cape Lives Matter, we currently started a food drive to give back to the community, and as well we're facing trial times, Cape Lives Matter movement. We try our best to involve mostly youth to be a part of the food drive so that they can also give back and see this as an importance of helping and giving back and fighting for what is right for our nation as a whole and for families that are going through insufferable pain. Cape Lives Matter focus mostly on the young lives, the innocently enslaved youth in the Western Cape, on the Cape Flats. That is mainly what we focus on. So you guys can contact us on our social media platforms on Instagram, Facebook, and also Twitter at Cape Lives Matter, and also email us at capelivesmatter@gmail.com, and you can also contact us on 084 9520.
The following video is brought to us from Cape Lives Matter. Youngsters voice that they are not defined by circumstances.
Not a gangster. I'm an innocent Capetonian. Science means nothing. I'm not a gangster.
Well, my clothes define my justice.
I am an innocent Capetonian.
Does my clothes define my justice?
Well, my clothes define my justice.
Well, I am.
I am.
I am.
I am.
I am an innocent Capetonian. Love and share this post if you are.
Many South Africans have rushed to the bottle stores last week after the lockdown ban on alcohol was lifted. It had been weeks of no booze sales, or that was supposed to have been the case. But it seems that dozens of liquor stores flouted the law. 65 liquor license holders are being investigated for breaking down lockdown regulations, and that was in the Western Cape. The Western Cape Liquor Authority says the investigations were conducted between the 23rd of March and the 5th of June. Of the 65 cases, 3 are still under investigation by the Liquor Authority. 8 have been referred to SAPS, 4 reports are being drafted for the Liquor Licensing Tribunal, and 1 is being referred to the tribunal, and 32 licenses have been suspended. Provincial Community Safety MEC Albert Fritz has welcomed the investigation. He said hospital trauma units are feeling the effects of the lifting of the alcohol ban. Fritz said the Western Cape had seen an increase in the number of alcohol-related trauma cases since the unbanning of alcohol. This was a major concern as the healthcare systems was already under pressure as a result of COVID-19 pandemic. He said he wanted to clear that the abuse of alcohol took beds away from people who needed it most. He urged citizens to drink responsibly and warned that if this did not happen, the provincial government would explore alternative steps to ensure that this happens. Higher Education Minister Blade Mzimande has briefed media on progress in the implementation of COVID-19 measures at tertiary institutions and the training sector, as well as the rollout of laptops for students. The zero rating of departmental and public institution sites are phasing all of other programs.
Of our data now, we have about 586 websites in our sector that are zero rated. Combining zero rating and education data bundles. My department, together with the Department of Communications and Digital Technologies, we have now concluded negotiations and standardization of pricing and conditions with the cell phone companies for this data for 3 months. So these data bundles now are going to start being available, as we had said, now at the beginning of June. Continuing, by the way, other data bundles that have already been given by some of our institutions. We estimate about half of our universities, for instance, have actually released data bundles for students or for certain categories of students. And we are going to be continuing with this until we reach all NSFAS students. The COVID-19 responsiveness grant that we have set up, which we are working on for each university, will at the very least cover the data costs of these students. Universities, after agreement with NSFAS, will get into individual agreements with the cell phone companies and provide these companies with the necessary information on students. TVET colleges will be funded through savings from previous year's student bursary funding held by NSFAS. The provision of data will be part of the full package of the provision of devices to TVET college students who are currently NSFAS beneficiaries. In other words, your TVET college student, you will get these data bundles. And of course, I will explain about the gadgets, together with the gadgets. On the electronic devices, the gadgets, for the past 2 weeks, the ministry and the department have tirelessly been engaging with National Treasury on the procurement of devices for the NSFAS students. Today, I can confirm that by the end of this week, we will be commencing with the central procurement of these devices, particularly laptops, through an open tender system, given the nature and the value of the procurement. And this will be done, this process will be led by NSFAS. Now, we have agreed with the National Treasury that given the huge amounts involved in the central acquisition of outstanding tablets, this is not the beginning of the tablets. Many institutions, about half of them, as we have said, have already given out or are in the process of giving out tablets to students. But for the rest of the NSFAS students, this process applies to them that I'm explaining now. We have agreed with the National Treasury that given the huge amounts involved in the central acquisition of outstanding tablets, it is better to follow proper procedures than take shortcuts, even if there is some delay, so as to properly account for spending of taxpayers' money. Treasury has agreed with us we're going to have a shortened process of calling for expression of interest over a 14-day period, working through NSFAS, which is normally much shorter than what we do. This may cause some delay, but we better do so because this involves billions of rands of taxpayers' money.
We will continue giving you the latest news from the city, province and around the world. When we return, we will hear what the South African Union of Students thought about Minister Blade Mzimande's briefing, the challenges that UWC students are facing, and the latest on George Floyd. Welcome back. You're still tuned into Channel 263 on Days TV and the Wednesday edition of the Our City COVID-19 show on Cape Town TV. Lucanio Dawiti, a national executive member of the South African Unions of Students, spoke to us about students' reactions to Higher Education Minister Blade Mzimande's briefing on the implementation of the COVID-19 measures at tertiary institutions and the training sector.
Firstly, we must say that ever since this COVID-19 outbreak, we have been part of the discussions with the Department of Higher Education. which meant that we were also part of the task team that was dealing with the challenges which are faced in the higher education sector. So from what the minister have said yesterday, the only part that we think that it has shocked the nation, or the higher education sector in general, is the issue of the gadgets, where he has announced that they are still going to open up a tender process in terms of getting the gadgets, which might take up to 3 weeks. You will remember on the 23rd of May, the minister clearly indicated that by the 1st of June, all NSFAS students will be having their gadgets. So from that, I think as the union will take a serious exception to that. We have never expected it, and we're disappointed on that. Also, I think we must also say that we would have expected the minister to make a bold announcement in terms of the missing middle, because the reality of the matter is that the COVID-19 became as a very, it was not known by anyone. So to say that the missing middle, you are still going to find as solutions, you are looking at the loan schemes, which are not going to be implemented in this current period. So how are you expecting them to now cope with the current challenges which are they faced with within the higher education sector? Top of that, you see, again, on the issue of the gadgets, if you are saying that you're going to take another 3 weeks to deliver the gadgets, students, the online learning has started on the 1st of June. How are you expecting those students who does not have gadgets now to participate on the online learning? Because he has not presented any plan to say that there will be a catch-up for those students who are affected. So that, as a union, is a concern to us. And it's something that we think that minister, it was not a well-thought process. If you listen to the minister correctly yesterday, minister spoke about that there are 50% of the universities have delivered the gadgets. But he does not specify which of those universities, of that 50%, which of those universities. So you can tell that even the minister, in the manner in which he was delivering his address, he wanted to be vague as he might, so that he is not taken to be accountable. Because the reality of the matter is that the majority of the institutions which have delivered gadgets are the previously advantaged institutions. You speak about Stellenbosch, you speak about your VETS, you speak about your UCT, UP. What about WUSU? What about Fort Hare? What about University of Zululand? You understand? You get me what I'm trying to say? Yes, in some instances, some of the previously disadvantaged institutions have tried to procure laptops, but they have not reached all the students. So now, if now you are allowing the online learning to continue while there are those gaps, what does it mean to the higher education sector? So as the union, you are against what is currently happening, the division that is happening in the higher education sector. It's something that we believe that the department has to address it, because it is against our belief in terms of transforming the higher education and, of course, transferring the society in general. The union now, we are forced to be in a position that we ensure that the department does announce a clear plan in terms of how are we going to deal with the students who are going to be affected. Because what we cannot afford is to have students who are going to be left behind, and then there is no clear plan in terms of how are they going to deal with them. So we are going to engage the department on a continuous basis, as we have done, because you would recall from the address of the minister yesterday, he mentioned the issue of N+ role of NSFAS. That has been an engagement that we have never given up, because the department has been reluctant to make an announcement on that in terms of how it should deal with these cases specifically, even though they have not addressed it entirely. But I must say that the positivity of it is that at least now they are willing to deal with the matters in relation to students who have been declined because they were not considered based on their medical conditions. They were not considered based on whether they have deregistered, and then the N+ was applied incorrectly so. And then also, the issue of final year students, even if you have exhausted your N+ role, but if you are in the final year of your study, then you must be allowed at least perhaps given a chance to finish your study, so that you can be able to go and make change within your family. So those are the things that I must say that they are the positivity in terms of his address yesterday, and also particularly highlighting the issue of the mental health. I think we were happy to hear that there is guidelines that are in place which are going to deal with the mental health related illnesses which are going to arise post this COVID-19, because we believe that this post-COVID-19 does not only pose challenges, but it will also affect both students and academics severely in terms of their mental illness.
Sticking to higher education, students from the University of the Western Cape took to Twitter yesterday to voice their grievances that many students have not received data or electronic devices. Exams are scheduled to start next week. We spoke to the UWC SRC President, Sasha Douglas.
Hashtag UWC March 4 came as a result of our students not having sufficient resources or not having access to resources at all for online learning. So the university on the 20th of April commenced with online learning, and they had made a commitment to provide our students in need with data and devices. So students had put in requests about, let's say approximately 11,000 put in requests for data, and 4,500 students put in requests for devices. The university launched a hashtag No Student Will Be Left Behind campaign where they raised funds in an attempt to raise funds for the devices and the data. Since the 20th of April up until now, only 25% of the students who requested devices have received them. So last week, the university did release a communication. They actually released one as well, stating that the first 2,000 of the 4,500 devices have been couriered to students, but to date, the only update we have is that only about 500 out of the 2,000 students have received their devices. In terms of the data, the first upload was completed. Around 10,000 students received their data upload, but a number of students out of those who initially requested it have not received their first upload, and now we are facing delays with regards to the second upload of data. Now, this is a big problem because the academic program at UWC is essentially continuing. Students are still expected to make submissions, students are still expected to do online assessments, online tests, and now it's getting even worse because the university intends on starting with examinations on the 16th of June. So there's this continuous movement being made by the university, and in the process, a number of our students are being left behind. And we've consistently said that students have consistently said, can you just delay the commencement of the online learning program up until we ensure that everyone has the resources? The university has refused to do that on every occasion. The SRC has submitted various proposals to the university as to how the program could be delayed. Initially, we asked that they do not commence on the 20th of April because students did not have any resources at the time. The students who indicated need, they continued.
The SRC will be meeting up with the management of the university on Friday.
We have not received any new communication from the university. So our last meeting, we did bring up the SRC. Our biggest concern in our last meeting was the fact that examinations are meant to start soon. A number of students will not be able to write those examinations. So we wanted to start a discussion around possibly postponing the examination. That has not yet been fruitful. We have not yet received a response to that question. We will be having another meeting with a member of the university executive on Friday. So in that meeting, I am hopeful that we can get a response on the issue of examination. There's been no new updates on data and devices, only that the process of delivery is still continuing, meaning in the first stock, that 2,000 that has been couriered is continuing, and that the data uploads are meant to continue. So that means the second phase, or the second upload, is supposed to be happening now, and then students who were missed out in the first upload are supposed to be getting their upload. But the BBC academic, who is now our acting rector, has not yet given a response to the concerns raised by multiple students and the SRC. It seems that they are going to do what they've been doing, which is see our concerns, note them, but move on anyway. I think that's the biggest problem now, is that the university management are behaving as if they are not informed of what our struggles are, and they are convinced that the list that has been done is sufficient. There's also another issue, which is the zero rating of our Ikampa, which is an online learning platform for UWC students. Initially, it was meant to be zero rated, and the university said that they are engaging service providers. That has not been fruitful. So currently, it is not zero rated, and it's still costing students a lot to access, just accessing the site where you can get your assessments and such. So we should also be getting feedback on that, because last we spoke to ICS, they informed us that they are still engaging the service providers. And then on the issue of laptops, a big part of UWC Must Fall was also that the university raised funds, but now students are being charged for the devices that they are being given. So essentially what happened is the money that they made through the fundraising campaign, according to them, is used for data, and then students would be charged an amount of 6,300 rand for the laptop. That is incredibly problematic. I think it is also unethical to raise public funds for a particular cause and then not use the money for what it was meant for. If the university made a commitment to provide students with devices, then the cost should fall on them, because already students do not have money. A number of students do not have funding. We have a huge category of students at UWC who form a part of the missing middle, meaning those students do not have funding. So you can't now just increase someone's debt, which is going to, in turn, next year, when we commence with the new academic calendar for 2021.
We have reached out to the university's management for a comment. Now for international news. A private funeral for George Floyd took place in his hometown of Houston in Texas yesterday. Meanwhile, his death at the hands of Minneapolis police officers continues to fuel urgent demands for racial justice and law enforcement accountability. Floyd will be laid to rest alongside his mother at a cemetery in a nearby Pearland. At least 6,000 people mourned at Floyd's memorial.
A private ceremony with hundreds of people inside the Houston church, and many more along the route to the cemetery. The funeral service was broadcast on all major U.S. networks. The presumptive Democratic presidential nominee joined via video.
We cannot leave this moment thinking we can once again turn away from racism that stings at our very soul.
Houston police officers saluted as the casket entered the church. 4 officers in Minneapolis faced charges in Floyd's death, one of them charged with murder.
Until the law is upheld and people know they will go to jail, they're going to keep doing it because they're protected by wickedness in high places.
A Houston police official called this a watershed moment.
And I really believe that there's a great hope here in this city, and that hope is spreading nationwide.
This was the 3rd memorial in states where George Floyd had lived: Minnesota, North Carolina, and Texas. Monday, thousands came for a public viewing of the body in Houston. Tuesday, his family grieved.
Everybody going to remember him around the world. He's going to change the world.
I just want to say that I'm going to miss my brother a whole lot. And I just want to say to him, I love you, and I thank God for giving me my own personal Superman. God bless you all.
And grapple with questions raised by his death. Mike O'Sullivan, VOA News, Los Angeles.
Protests that flared up in the U.S. Capitol after the death of George Floyd saw some downtown D.C. restaurants and cafes looted and damaged. But despite the damage and having to wait even longer to finally reopen their venues, some business owners are choosing to support the protesters. Voice of America has the story.
Instead of open terraces filled with locals, many downtown DC restaurants and cafes instead are boarded up because of protests over the death of George Floyd. Amid the businesses that were looted and damaged during the protests in the U.S. Capitol was the restaurant Equinox that is located just steps away from the White House. They had only been open for a day when they had to close and board up their doors again.
You know, the first night we did walk down there when we heard what was going on, adrenaline kind of kicked in. And we went, you know, with the permission of the police, to go down. And, you know, you're like, it's like a mother, you know, you see your child pinned under a car and suddenly you can lift the car. It really just isn't about us and our property. There's such a bigger issue going on right now that talking about this damage done, at least, you know, with us, it just seems irrelevant.
When the looting happened, the restaurant was empty and no one from the staff got hurt. But no one knows when they will be able to go back to work safely.
I can't put my employees at risk that way, so we're not going to open until I'm listening closely to what the mayor says. I'm watching what's going on, and we have to give them room and not compete with them for space.
Owners of the chain Dolcezza also suffered some damage. Windows in one of their downtown cafes were broken.
The city center, yes. That individual store postponed the reopening of that until we kind of work and sort all this stuff out, and then we get new glass in the windows and all that. So that might be not open until another 2 or 3 weeks.
Counting the damages that protests have brought about is another painful chapter for restaurant and cafe owners after they were forced to close for over 2.5 months. Amy Brandwain, owner of restaurants Centrolina and Piccolina, was luckier than most. She had boarded up windows and doors before the unrest began. But she still worries her businesses might not survive this new wave of hardships.
I actually can't sustain the economic damage that would entail, like, replacing the windows. It would really delay opening at some point in the future. It would really be hurtful for me. So the way I feel is that it should be peaceful, but there's been so much pain that it's very hard to control the emotions of the masses. And we need to get organized and making sure the voices are heard in a way that is impactful for change. You know, I'm not sure breaking any more windows is going to be doing it.
However, there are a lot of business owners that say they back the protesters no matter what, and if they sustain certain damage, so be it.
Whether you want to argue if it's all peaceful and that's the way to happen, or whether you want to argue, no, we must rise up, and within the rise there is violence and there is destruction. I honestly, I don't know the way to what is the right way, if there is any right way for that to be able to happen. All I care about is it to happen.
The capital's restaurants are allowed to be open. However, the majority don't risk to open just yet, hoping things normalize soon. Karina Befredjan for VOA News, Washington.
That's all from the news front, but when we come back, Stephanie Pitt will give us an update on what's trending on social media.
Welcome back. You're still watching the Our City COVID-19 show. I'm Stephanie Pitt. We posted a question on our Facebook page asking your views on the rise in gang violence since the start of level 3 lockdown. These are some of your comments. Bernadette Dowd says, crime has been and never stopped. Now crime fighters are being told to chase smokes and ignore and protect and serve. Sharon Hoffman says, it's been calm for years and then sudden flare-ups. Who's supplying the ammunition? Christoffel Mr. Change Manville says, it's very sad the fact that it's not something new. Maybe frontline workers focus too much on COVID-19 that we forget about the norm. Alton Joseph says, where are the soldiers that were supposed to be deployed under lockdown? Various areas within the Cape Flats have seen violence flare up since the start of level 3 lockdown. But wary Cape Townians say this is nothing new and that while police are chasing those contravening lockdown regulations, everything else has been put on the back burner. Now let's take a look at the popular hashtags on Twitter today. Hashtag Julius Malema. It's the EFF leader's turn to fall today. Malema's comments about President Ramaphosa calling him a bastard and claiming he had retreated from the coronavirus battle to appease white monopoly capital have stirred an angry reaction even from some of his own supporters. Hashtag cigarette ban. It's the second day of the court appeal by FETA to have the cigarette ban lifted. Much of the sentiment is that we should not be treated like naughty kids, while others reiterate that smoking kills. We'd like to know your views on burning issues during this pandemic, so we'll be posting burning questions on our Facebook page daily, Our City CT. You can also follow us on Twitter at Our City CT. That's it from me, Stephanie Piet. Please stay with us. After the break, Michaela Miller will be giving you information on resources and places of safety you can use during this period. Stay with us.
Welcome back. You're still tuned into Our City, the COVID show on Cape Town TV, channel 263. Here's a recap of today's headlines. A member of a community policing forum talks to us about the flare of the gang violence on the Cape Flats. Cape Lives Matter, a 17-year-old has started a movement to highlight deaths on the Cape Flats and remember the innocents who have lost their lives. A private funeral for George Floyd has taken place in his hometown of Houston in Texas. If you are in need of any assistance, here are some organizations helping communities stay safe during this period. That's it from the Our City COVID-19 show, but we will continue giving you the latest news on what's happening in Cape Town on our Facebook page at Our City CT and on Twitter at Our City CT. You can also get in touch with us via email on ourcity@capetowntv.org or call us on 021 448 0448. From me, Michaela Miller and the Our City News crew, goodbye.